Some birds migrate many hundreds of kilometers over the ocean where there are few landmarks. For example, the Arctic terns breed in the northern Arctic latitudes, for example, in the northern Canada, flying east across the Atlantic in the fall or autumn season, changing course to the south of the coast of England, and finally spending the winter far in the south, reaching Antarctica. In the spring, they reverse the migration, though probably by a different routes. This Arctic tern travels many kilometers round trip course each year. Similarly, the slender-billed shearwater breeds in southeast Australia and Tasmania and migrates to Alaska via Japan. Its return journey takes it down the western coast of North America. Thus, during its annual flight in a large clockwise loop around the Pacific, it crosses the equator on two occasions, and in this way it is exposed to a variety of changes in length of the day, apparent path of the sun, climatic conditions, and so on. So migration in mammals, we are taking example of migration in mammals. Among the mammals, wild beasts, caribou, zebra, gazelle, bison, seals, and whales perform and arduous journeys each year. For example, in the Serengeti Plain of Tanzania, East Africa, long seasonal migrations are performed by zebra, wild beast, and Thompson's gazelle. This species spend the dry season feeding on open torn woodlands where, owing to the low rainfall, they are limited in their movement to the vicinity of waterholes. In December, when the first rain comes, the herds move into the central plains of the Serengeti and then migrate in a predominantly anti-clockwise direction following the rains and new vegetation. Most apparently, wild beasts can sense where rain is falling by using their eyes and ears, but not by their noses, and then migrate in that direction. Although the direction of migratory movement is purely opportunistic, animals simply move toward areas where rain can be seen or heard falling. The sequence in which the different species move around is determined by specific food requirements. In the Serengeti, the sequence is generally zebra first, wild beasts second, and gazelle third. Stomach analysis have shown that zebra take a high proportion of grass stem material. By trapping the grass and removing the tough stems, zebra open up the herd layer to what wild beasts, which feed mainly on grass leaf, can then move in. The joint action of the zebra and wild beast exposes the broad-leaved plant layer preferred by the gazelle. By following the rains, the zebra continuously move from a depleted habitat to one with fresh, abundant vegetation. In their turn, the wild beast and gazelle capitalize on the selective feeding of the previous species and also move from poor to good habitats. The survival value of a seasonal return migration is illustrated by the mortality figures for migrant and non-migrant species. The most important mortality factor in the migratory zebra wild beast population is predation. Few migrant animals die of starvation. In non-migrant species, each such as impala and warthog, the opposite is true. In them, starvation often outweighs predation as a cause of death. They starve to death. Migration in reptiles. Migratory reptiles include the leatherback turtles, which may move vast distances between a breeding area in French Guiana and points near North America and Africa. One population of the green sea turtle, a tiny speck of land in the center of the Atlantic Ocean between Africa and Brazil. The adult female turtles visit the island only to deposit their eggs in beach sands. They then swim 1,000 miles or so to warm, shallow water of Brazil, where they feed on marine vegetation for several years before returning, usually to the same beach, to lay another clutch of eggs. Migration amphibians. Amphibians too show long distance migrations. A salamander, the California newt, breeds in pools and mountain streams in the spring and then spends the summer months underground. In the rainy fall and winter, the newts wander widely over the forest floor in search of insect food. In the spring, the adults migrate back to the stream, often to the pool where they bred the previous year. Newts experimentally displaced hundreds of meters of upstream or downstream had to difficulty relocating their home home pools. Home pools. Migration in fishes. Some fishes show mainly one return journey migration. They make only one return journey during their lifetime. They are born in one habitat, make their major growth in another habitat, but then return to breed and die in the home of their infancy. For example, European eel, Angula angula, travels from European rivers and ponds across the Atlantic to the Sargasso Sea, where it is thought to reproduce and die, although spawning adults and eggs had never actually been caught there. The American eel makes comparatively journeys from acres ranging between Guianas in the south, so southwest, Greenland in the north. The salmon makes a comparable transition but from a freshwater egg and juvenile phase to mature as a marine adult. From marine habitat, it then returns to freshwater slits to lay eggs. After spawning, all Pacific Ocean salmon die without ever returning to sea. Many Atlantic salmon also die after spawning, but some survive to return to the sea and then migrate back to the home of their infancy. Migratory fish returns often with very high precision to the home of their infancy, and some are known to use information from the sun, polarized light, and geomagnetic fields. First one is the information about sun, polarized light, and geomagnetic fields as generalized cues and increase the homeward bound direction of migration, but the more sensitive control of the direction of long distance migration appear to be determined by olfactory cues and then closer to main memory of local topography. This is strong evidence that each river and tributary has a characteristic order, and as young fish imprint this order to them before they migrate to sea. In the homeward journey, they track the changing concentrations of the chemicals responsible for the odor. The eel can apparently detect concentrations of beta phenylethyl alcohol. The eel can apparently detect concentrations of beta phenylethyl alcohol that represent only 2 or 3 molecules on the olfactory epithelium. There is some evidence that salmon remember separately and in order each order along the seaward migration and reach to each in reverse order when they return home. An important effect of homing in migrating animals is that mating will be largely restricted to geographically localized populations within the space. Migration in invertebrates. There are many examples of migratory invertebrates. For example, Atlantic lobsters living off the continental shelf of the United States apparently move back and forth from deep water to coastal areas, a one-way trip frequently exceeding 80 km. Caribbean spiny lobsters have been observed marching along in a conga line of dozens of individuals with each crustacean holding onto one in front of it. This formation results in drag reduction and conserves the energy for migrating individuals. Lobsters. Among the migratory insects, the monarch butterfly has a return journey pattern of migration. Its population travel north in the USA and Canada to breed and may return to north in the spring, but it appears that each individual makes more than one return journey. On a much smaller scale, one return ticket migration can also be seen in the life cycle of many insects, for example, butterflies, moths, caddis flies, and stoneflies. The individual spends the early part of its life on one habitat. The individual spends the early part of its life in one habitat, the larval food plant for butterflies, and aquatic stage in the caddis fly. Migrates to another habitat when sexually mature, reproducible adult, and return to the juvenile habitat only to lay eggs. In some migratory species, the journey for an individual is an strictly one-way ticket. In Europe, the butterflies such as the clouded yellow, red admiral, and painted lady butterflies breed at both ends of their migrations. The individuals that reach Great Britain in the summer breed there, and their offspring fly south in autumn and breed in the Mediterranean region. The offspring of this in turn come north in the following summer. So, ecological factors regulating migration, we are going to learn about that. Most migrations occur seasonally in the life of individuals or populations. They are usually seen to be triggered by some external seasonal phenomenon such as changing day length and sometimes also by an internal physiological clock. They are often preceded by quite profound physiological changes such as accumulation of body fat. They represent strategies evolved in environments where seasonal events such as rainfall and temperature cycles are reliably repeated from year to year. There is, however, a type of migration that is tactical, forced by events such as overcrowding, and appears to have no cycles or regularity, and these are most common in environments where rainfall is not seasonally reliable. The economically disastrous migration plugs of locusts in arid and semi-arid regions are most striking examples. Locusts change their behavior when they become crowded during periods of peak population growth. There is a phase change that occurs over 3 generations from a solitary phase where they behave as individuals through a generation in the transience phase to a third generation in a gregaria phase where they start to band together and behave as members of a herd, and then they fly as powerful flying machines forming immense swarms in the daytime. So here we are going to talk about locusts. Change their behavior when they become crowded. During periods of peak population growth, there is a phase change that occurs over 3 generations from a solitary phase when they behave as individuals through a generation in a transience phase to a third generation in a gregaria phase when they started to band together and behave as members of a herd, and then they fly as powerful flying machines forming immense swarms in the daytime. Dense swarms of locusts migrate downwind to areas of low barometric pressure where they are most likely to encounter rain and abundance of food plants. Then they fly at day and stop migrating when they encounter wet conditions. Sexual maturation, copulation, and deposition of eggs then occur. Locust-like behavior is also found in other swarming pests like armyworm, Senegalese grasshopper, spruce budworm, etc. Army worm, grasshopper, and budworm. Now we are going to learn about fish migration. Generally, fishes have a constant habitat and restrict their movement within particular territorial limits, but there are many species which migrate from one type of habitat, freshwater, to another, seawater or vice versa, and travel long distances. In most cases, this movement of a large number of fishes may occur for the purpose of feeding, spawning, or shelter, and it's called migration. Types of migratory fishes. Diatromous fishes. These fishes migrate to between freshwater and seawater. Diadromous fishes are subdivided into the following three types: anadromous fishes, catadromous fishes, and amphidromous fishes. Anadromous fishes examples are salmon, bass, shad, and hilsa fishes. So we are going to learn about anadromous fishes. Anadromous fishes, these fishes migrate from sea to freshwater for spawning. Sturgeon, Atlantic salmon, Pacific salmon, and hilsa. Next one is the catadromous fishes. These fishes migrate from freshwater to the sea for spawning in the common or freshwater eels and the American eel. Eels are the examples of catadromous fishes: American eel and European eel. Amphidromous fishes. These fishes migrate from seawater to freshwater and vice versa. This type of migration is not for the purpose of breeding but for other purposes like food. This movement may occur regularly at some definite stages of life cycle. Gobies undertake migration for food. Semi-migratory fishes. Some fishes migrate from seawater to estuaries and are not marked by migratory changes. Roach's whitefish and Asiatic milkfish. Example are whitefish, semi-migratory fishes. Now comes the potamodromous fish. Potamodromous fish. These fishes live and migrate only within freshwater. Carps, etc. Carps and trots travel long distance in large rivers in search of suitable spawning grounds. These fishes return to feeding areas after spawning. Oceanodromous fishes. Now we are going to learn about oceanodromous fishes. These fishes live and migrate only within the sea. Herrings, mackerel, sardine, tuna. These fishes travel long distance in the sea from deeper ocean waters to the shallow in-shore spawning areas at the time of breeding. After spawning, they return to their breeding grounds. A herring, a sardine, and a mackerel. Oceanodromous fishes. Many marine fishes also perform seasonal migration. For example, swordfish and barracudas living in warm tropical seas perform a latitudinal migration, moving north in spring and south in autumn. This migration occurs only in the suitable climatic condition. So, further, on the basis of purpose, migration in fish has been classified into the following types. Alimental or feeding migration. This type of migration occurs for the purpose of search for food, Bombay duck, etc. And the gametic or spawning or breeding migration. This type of migration is undertaken by a fish to ensure better survival and proper development of their eggs and larvae. Example, hilsa. Climatic or wintering migration. This type of migration takes place to secure more suitable climatic conditions. Sturgeons, Atlantic salmon, etc. Sturgeons and Atlantic salmon. Now, next one is the osmoregulatory or protective migration. This type of migration takes place for osmoregulation, water and minerals. Methods of migratory movement: denatant and quaternatant. Migratory movements are of two types, along with the water current, called denatant movement of pelagic eggs and young salmons, or against the water current, called contranatant migration of adult salmons towards spawning ground. Drifting. By this method, fishes are carried passively along with the water current. The young fishes migrate to nursery grounds by drifting. By swimming, this is the following of two types: random swimming and oriented swimming. Random swimming extends to uniform distribution or to an aggregation. Oriented swimming takes place either toward or away from a source of stimulation or some angle to an imaginary line running between them and the source of stimulation. Speed of fish during migration. Speed is an important factor in migrating fish. Speed at which different species of fish move during migration is influenced by a number of physiological or environmental factors. First one is the maximum speed. The maximum speed at which a fish can move is 10 times the body length per second. Body length into 10 by second. The speed cannot be maintained by the fish for more than 1 minute. They have to slow down to regain stamina and may again attain the maximum speed. The maximum speed at which a fish can move is 10 times a body length per second. Maximum sustainable speed. The speed can be sustained by a fish over long periods. At times, it is 3 times the body length per second. In herring of 25 centimeter size, the maximum sustainable speed will be 75 centimeter per second. In a cod of 80 centimeter, the maximum sustainable speed will be 240 centimeter per second. Spectacular migrants such as salmon, cod, and eel breed in one area but grows up and feed in another area. Interestingly, the distance between the feeding and spawning grounds may be over 700 miles. Examples of fish migration. Migration of salmon. In fishes, migration of salmon is a well-known and classical example. Salmon migrates in schools and anadromes. They spend their adult lives in sea but return to freshwater to spawn. There are 9 species of salmon belonging to 2 genera: Atlantic salmon, Salmo salmon, and Pacific salmon, and many other types like the sockeye salmon, coho salmon, chum salmon, pink salmon, and Japanese masu salmon. All these 9 species of salmons perform migration, but there are important differences among the species. The Atlantic salmon makes upstream spawning runs, breeding migrations year after year. The Pacific salmon takes a single spawning run, after which they die. A stream in which the salmon was born was proved itself suitable for reproduction. Mature salmon will therefore endure a long and difficult journey from oceanic feeding grounds to freshwater spawning grounds, risking death from exhaustion or predation in order to have offspring in or near its birthplace. The Atlantic salmon spawn mainly during November and December. They ascend the rivers as the breeding ground approaches, traveling several thousand kilometers in sea and then inland. On entering freshwater, this contralateral migrant stops feeding and loses weight. Contranatal species. As a result, the energy required for upriver movement is provided by accumulation nutrients, chiefly in the form of fat deposits and body. Their bright silvery color changes to dull reddish brown shade. The body of the male salmon becomes spotted with red, orange, and large black spots. Such male breeding salmon is known as a redfish, and the darker the female is called as a blackfish. After After selecting suitable spawning grounds, the fish aggregate to pairs. Shallow, saucer-like depressions are prepared to their liver bed by the females where spawning takes place. Salmon that are born in British Columbia, Fraser rivers move far out of the northern Pacific Ocean before returning to breed in the river where they begin life. The fertilized eggs of salmon hatch into salt salmon during spring. A large number of yolk is retained by the young salmon on emerging from the eggs. This stage is called the alveolar stage. After further growth, the yolk is reabsorbed and the size of 3 to 5 centimeters is attained. This larva is now called fry, which grows further to form a fingerling and remains in the river for an year or more. During the spirit, the young fish continues to feed and grow and transforms into the smolt stage after attaining a certain amount of maturity. Smolts stop feeding and then starts their journey toward the sea. Some species may migrate after hatching, while others take as long as 7 years before starting migration. After spawning, the return journey to the sea begins, but few males survive to breed a second time. However, many females be able to reach the sea and start feeding. They soon recover their normal condition and silvery color. The salmon does not usually spawn more than 3 times in its lifetime of 8 or 9 years. The three king salmon of the Pacific coast of North America travels about 3,600 kilometers from the sea in order to reach the rivers to spawn. However, all of them die after spawning. No male or female succeeds in returning to sea as they are already too much exhausted to undertake a return journey. Albert Arthur Hassler has studied the migration of sockeye salmon. The salmon hatch in streams of the United States and Canada. After the smolt stage of development, they swim downstream to the Pacific Ocean. After 2 to 3 years in the sea, they become sexually mature and migrate back to the exact ocean where they were spawned. The return journey to coast is probably accomplished by means of celestial cues, stars of azimuth position of sun, and the internal biological clocks. Once at the coast, however, they have to select the correct river and correct tributary stream within the river system. After many years of research, Hassler and co-workers discovered that during the smolting period of the almond imprint upon its olfactory system and characteristic odor of the native streams, the chemicals released by the vegetation and soil in the watershed of the parent stream. So during their return journey from other tributaries, they essentially are recognizing landmarks, but because the scent of birthplace follows all along the migratory route, it is not necessary for the young salmon to remember landmarks all along the outward journey. Salmon precision in homing. One of the most elaborate studies on homing behavior of salmon has been made by Andrew Gilbert A. Clements and Russell E. Forrester in Canada. They marked many young sockeye salmon born in the tributary of the Fraser River, and they recovered nearly 11,000 of this in the same parent stream after the fishes migrated to the ocean and back. What is more, not one of the marked fish was ever found to be stayed another stream. Salmon has very sensitive chemical sense. Studies have shown that young salmon hatches in freshwater could not return to sea until their salt secreting cells had developed. Some workers believe that fish have an extremely sensitive chemical sense that enables them to perform this feat homing. Another theory links the accelerated metabolism at warning time in the need of oxygen, which increases as they ascend the hard waters of the stream. Now let's check which are the factors for fish migration. Fish migrations are influenced by a number of physical, chemical, or biological factors. Physical factors, they include quality of water, bottom material, water depths, pressure, temperature, light intensity, and photoperiod, current, tides, and turbidity. So, which are the factors? Physical factors. They include quality of water, bottom materials, water depths, pressure, temperature, light intensity, and photoperiod, currents, tides, and turbidity and associated things. Then comes the chemical factors. This includes salinity, pH, dissolved oxygen, types of dissolved organic substance, smell and taste of water. Then is the biological factors. This includes sexual maturity, blood pressure, food, memory, effect of endocrine secretion, and the related physiological changes in the blood streams and behavior, social response, biological clock, etc. Presence or absence of predators and active competitors may also be taken as a biological factor. Then theories or hypotheses regarding fish migration. We are going to learn about theories or hypotheses regarding fish migration. Several laboratory and field studies have been conducted to solve the mystery by which a fish can select the course and subsequently maintain its direction during long migratory movement. Following theories or hypotheses have been forwarded to explain the homing or navigation during fish migration. Olfactory hypothesis is the next point. According to this hypothesis, a fish may recognize its surrounding and path of migration by detecting the specific odor from a stream or water body. This odor may depend on the bottom topography, soil, plants, and springs at the bottom from which the water body requires its organic quality. Scientists have also termed this as the stream factor. A.D. Hassler has supported olfactory hypothesis with imprinting and regards it as a sensory basis of homing. He has suggested that the salmon may learn to recognize the organic quality of water in the initial days of its life cycle, and this may become imprinted for the rest of its life. Thus, a fish smells its way home as would a fox would. The paleocortex is therefore a dominant part of the fish brain as it receives impulses from the olfactory tissue. This region is much less significant in non-migratory fishes as well as in humans. Internal biological clocks. Experimental evidence have suggested that the fish or salmon during its migration is able to adjust its course of orientation through internal biological clocks. These adjustments to seasons, to latitudes, as well as to time of the day through longitudes are according to appearance of light. Sun compass mechanism. Evidently, open water migrations in salmons may be directed by a sun compass mechanism. This may be directed either by the altitude of the sun or by changing diurnal azimuth of the sun by the combination of the two. To swim in a single direction, the fish probably calculates appropriate horizontal angles to the sun during different times of the day. Groundwater separate hypothesis. According to this theory, which was proposed by Hardin Jones, the assembly area for spawning are identified by marine fish with the help of the chemical that enter the sea by groundwater seepage. Pheromones. Pheromones are suggested to play an important role in identifying these spawning areas. They may prevent further spawning in a particular area after a sufficient number of eggs have already been laid. Then the celestial reference points. The use of the celestial points in maintaining a steady course in midwaters was suggested to be useful, especially in nocturnal travel. Nocturnal direction may also be assisted by gravity, magnetic field, oceanic currents, especially during moonlight or starless nights. Tidal transport. This mode of migration is performed by plays of south pride of North Sea and saves energy, and problems of direction was eliminated if the right tide is caught at the right time. Then is the gradient theory. This is based on the salmon's presumed ability to follow gradients of physicochemical characteristics of water, mainly temperature and carbon dioxide. It has been shown that salmon swim in the direction of coolest waters and that high CO2 tension repels migrating salmons. So these are the main theories: olfactory hypothesis, internal biological clock, sun compass mechanism, groundwater sewage hypothesis, pheromones, celestial reference points, and tidal transport along with the gradient theory. Gradient theory is something which is explained by the presence of CO2 and temperature.